Hey, good morning everyone. This is Steve Wood from Panavia, and we have with us a member of automotive royalty. This is a 1965 GT350 that we've worked on at Panavia, and we're going to do a video today to talk about the differences in what made a 65 GT350 a very special car. Not just for Mustangs, not just for Shelbys, but all cars, all time. So the car was basically a stock low-end interior car, the base interior. They removed at Shelby, they removed the traditional Mustang trim tag that would have been there. And so that was definitely removed because that also contained the Ford VIN. Under the hood, and we'll talk about Ford VINs in a little bit, under the hood, the Ford VIN is still there, underneath the aluminum stamped Shelby serial number tag. But Shelby added quite a few things to the interior of the GT350, very special things for the 1960s. They added the Ray Brown seat belts, which are a lot like an aircraft belt from World War II. These used to be available from a lot of people, but these were race belts that were used in the 1960s. A lot of guys who were racing in the 1960s were World War II veterans, like Ken Miles. Ken Miles drove a British tank on D-Day on Normandy Beach. And there was a ton of World War II surplus, and it was the inexpensive way to get well-built items. So a lot of 60s hot rods, a lot of 70s hot rods and Can-Am cars were World War II surplus. Things like oil coolers, seat belts, metal, even paints, and we'll talk about that on a future episode. But for the interior, you have a Motolita steering wheel. Motolita is a brand from England. They're still manufactured today, and they're the steering wheel of choice for your GT350, your Cobra, or your Jaguar, and many other British makes. They're an aluminum hubbed and wood wheel that's actually riveted together. And so Shelby put these on the cars to basically replicate kind of the Cobra feel, the sports car feel of the period. Then if you sneak a peek in the interior, he added a tack in a little ABS plastic, actually at the time it's fiberglass, binnacle that added more gauges to the Ford platform, because as you can see, we just have the longitudinal speedometer, the east-west speedometer, and a couple of real simple gauges. And you know what you want for a race car is definitely oil pressure to see if your oil is flowing well, and you definitely want a tachometer. And so he located those in the binnacle. All the 65s were 4-speed cars with a 289 K-code engine. Well, the K-code engine is the magic to this thing. If you look at the parts list for the 289 K-code engine, it's a solid lifter, 4.7 liter for our European friends, 4.7 liter V8. But the solid lifter K-code had so many little special parts in it. To this day, I'm still surprised it came out of Ford Motor Company. This is the motor company that basically invented green bar paper and the term bean counter from their accountants. Robert McNamara from history worked as one of the whiz kids in Ford's computer department to help them keep track of costs, because at a point in time, Ford would measure invoices with a yardstick on the pallets they would come in on and do their budgeting that way. No kidding, look that up. So we're going to talk about the 289 engine, and we're going to open the hood here. And so best way to open a hood on GT350. Keep in mind this is a fiberglass hood, and so it has hood pins. And one of the problems with a fiberglass hood, if you decide to put one on your car and make it like a GT350, got to remember either to take out the hood springs or get the special low pressure hood springs. This one doesn't really have any on there. And then also they take out the center latch. So you always want to push down on the hood, release the little keys. And then on the 65, these were not tied with a little stainless steel wire to the front of the car. You can if you want, but in the originals, they weren't. Notice also no latch. And you're saying to yourself, $500,000 car with a prop rod. Yep, that's Ford for you. So this is the aluminum tag we were talking about a little bit ago. This is the tag that they put on the cars. And that was to cover where the Ford VIN would be. There's a gentleman named Howard Pardee that works for the Shelby American Automobile Club, SAC, back east, and he's one of the king registrars, and they have a list from back in the day and from current of matching the Ford VIN to the Shelby VIN. And you would think that if the Ford VIN ended in like 100 or 101, that means that the Shelby car would be 101. No. When they unloaded them from the railway cars from the San Jose plant down to Venice Beach, they basically just pulled them off any old way, and then when they needed a car to build, they just pulled a car. There was no real correlation, no real order to the madness almost of putting these things together. And so when they pulled them into Shelby at 1042 Princeton, they didn't have lifts. They did all this work on jack stands, which is amazing by modern standards. So the Shelby 289 version of the K-Code engine started as a K-Code, which is, as we talked about before, solid lifter 289 with their high performance camshaft, and they changed out intake manifold, they changed out the valve covers, and they put headers on the car, and they went from 271 horsepower to 306 horsepower. That doesn't seem like very much, and by today's standards, you can get a Camry that comes stock with over 300 horsepower. But for 1965, it was a real kick in the pants. And what you get with a solid lifter engine that you don't get with a hydraulic lifter engine is the rapidness of action. And we'll start this up for you. The amazing kinetic energy and crispness of a solid lifter engine, and the noises, the wonderful mechanical noises it makes at like 3,000, 3,500 on up to 5,000 is really just a symphony of mechanics that just can't be explained in mere words. But really a special piece of equipment. This one has survived many years under its current ownership. It's a family car for them. They're going to keep it multiple generations. When we did the work on the car, we had the engine on our run stand, and we fired it up, and 4 generations of their family were there. That was a cool point, and that's why we do things like this. So engine bay differences in the GT350. We talked about this was the stock air cleaner for the Hypo 289. They put on a special carb with a special Shelby intake manifold, and that is basically 715 CFM. They called it the Le Mans carburetor. And they called it that way because the float bowls are sprung in a different location and fed in a different location from a standard Holley. This is a very special carburetor that has survived literally over 50 years. We had it rebuilt, and it's doing very well in the year 2022 here. But still, it's an incredible amount of work to get those to keep those running. Also, very special things in the K-Code Mustang was a dual point distributor, and that is dual mechanical points in there to have a very crisp spark signal for the high revving motor that this was. Other things that Shelby added was the export brace. They called it such as the Ford cars would not measure up to torsional rigidness specs for some of the foreign countries, and so they had to put this brace on there that was basically one piece of metal east-west versus the stock Mustang piece triangulates the shock tower with welded on mounts to a piece of sheet metal to the middle, but is not as beefy as this piece is. And you can see that the bolts are equally spaced. That is a Shelby GT350 trait. And also you can see the piece of metal that was fabricated and installed at Shelby that was welded to the cowl to give it more rigidness and something to bolt onto. In addition, we have the Cobra valve covers we talked about. They were made at Buddy Bar in Los Angeles, a company that in one form or another still survives today. The intake manifold, a very special piece that was put on by Shelby. And then some lovely headers. We went a little over the top with the headers, and the headers are a very nice copy of the original Tri-Wise, and I had them silver ceramic just to make them look beautiful. And it's a family car. It's not supposed to be a restoration queen. And the family that has this car Believe it or not, they actually drive it to shows, and they drive it to the Cheesecake Shop on the weekends and things like that. And just a wonderful family to have as a custodian for a car like this. So when it left Ford's Milpitas plant, it had front disc brakes, and the disc brakes themselves were made by Kelsey Hayes. And the back of the car was a Ford 9-inch rear end with a Detroit locker. And the Detroit locker is very much a violent piece of equipment. It makes clunks, sounds, it chirps tires and things. It's part of the experience. It just adds to the total experience. Do you need a car like this? No. Do you want a car like this? If you like the experience of road going and having everything you need and nothing you don't, it's like a Cobra with roll-up windows. The trunk. You're saying, Steve, you didn't look in the trunk. What the hell? So basically on a GT350, they put a little symbol on the back, and that was 2 holes. And keep in mind that production workers at Shelby weren't necessarily careful guys. So sometimes, depending on interpretation, they're in different places. So basically, it's about 1 inch from the taillight and biased up on the center line. So I use the center line of the taillight, the little crease, and I go 1 inch into the end and basically drill the holes and place it there. But this one's been on there since new. One special thing that Shelby did in 65, excuse the towel and the bungee cord, is they actually put the batteries in the trunk in 65 and relocated the battery into the trunk for weight distribution savings. And that was something they did mostly through the 65 production year. And then when Ford found out about this, because they were being back billed by Shelby for all these modifications to the car. And we'll talk about the modifications in a more comprehensive list later in this video. But when Ford got a hold of what they were spending on the cars versus what the cars were selling for versus what Ford was being billed for, the 66 car was decontented. And a few weeks ago, we had a 1966 GT350 in the same color combination next to this thing. I couldn't believe how much less stuff you got, how much less car you got in 1966 versus 1965. And that's why I think the 65 is the king of the Shelby Mustangs.